Have you ever heard a story that's so dark it keeps getting darker the more you hear it? Well, the story about the Dawson 5 is one of those stories, and I'm gonna be honest, this is not a ghost story. This is something much worse because ghosts don't wear badges. Ghosts don't sit across from you in interrogation rooms trying to get you to confess to something that you didn't do. Ghosts don't decide whether you go home or whether your mama gets to see you alive again. In 1976 in Dawson, Georgia, a small town not too far outside of Albany, Georgia, a town that's so small bad news seems to outrun the police sirens. A white store owner by the name of Gordon Powell, otherwise known as Bubba, was shot and unalived in a store robbery. And before his blood even had time to dry, everybody in the town wanted answers right then and there, not tomorrow, not after an investigation, right now. With that type of fear gripping the town in these days, being the wrong color in the wrong place could be all the evidence somebody needs to put you down. So it wasn't long after this happened that the police arrested 5 young black men: Roosevelt Washington, Henderson Washington, J.D. Davenport, Johnny B. Jackson, and George Poor. They ain't sitting in some fancy interrogation room that you see on TV. They're young, they're scared, they've never been through anything like this before in their life. They walked into that police station, the door slammed behind them, and hours started feeling like days to these guys. They had absolutely no idea what was going on outside this jail. They didn't know if their family knew where they were. Every time they heard footsteps coming towards the door, their stomach would drop. They didn't know if they were bringing them food or a piece of paper with their name on it saying, "You ain't leaving this prison alive." And a lot of people throw around the word confession like that's the end of the story, but sometimes a confession could just be the beginning of a nightmare. According to the court findings, these confessions were obtained through coercive methods, intimidation, and severe misconduct. Some of the young men later described being threatened so severely that they just couldn't take the pressure and it broke them. One of them said that an officer told them, "You might as well confess, you gonna fry anyway." Think about hearing that as a young black person in the South and not hearing it from a criminal, but somebody who's supposed to uphold the law. Imagine somebody convincing you that your life is already over and nobody can save you. And the electric chair is waiting for you whether you tell them what they want to hear or not. How long before that fear starts to sound like the truth? How long before your survival starts turning into surrender? Because fear does something to the human mind. It doesn't always make people tell the truth. Sometimes it makes people tell you whatever it's gonna take for them to stay alive for another day. And outside of the jail, the town hadn't already made up their mind. In coffee shops, parking lots, at the barber shop, somebody's front porch, everybody had their own theory. Everybody knew somebody who heard something or knew what was going on. And of course, the rumors were spreading faster than the facts. And once people have made up their minds that you're a monster, even your silence makes you sound guilty. Even the tears that you're crying seem fake. And every word that these young men were starting to speak was just another reason to not believe them. Meanwhile, these young black men were not just fighting criminal charges, they were fighting history. Because let's not sugarcoat what Georgia looked like at this time. The civil rights movement is not ancient history. Older black folks around this time still carried memories of black folks missing. Somebody just disappeared and we don't know what happened to them. They knew about mobs coming to somebody's house and deciding you're guilty before the sun even came up. They knew what it was like for justice to not be served in the courtroom but somewhere on a tree with a rope. And being honest, if this case would have happened 20, maybe even 10 years earlier, those young men probably would have never even made it to their police station, let alone being able to stand trial in a courtroom. That's not me exaggerating, that's just the shadow that history casted over the South. But all of a sudden, just when it was looking the darkest for these young men, civil rights attorneys started getting involved. Reporters from all around the country started showing up and asking questions. National attention had begun to shine in a place that had gotten used to operating in the dark. And things done in the dark always have a funny way of changing when somebody cut the lights on. Investigators started pulling at these little threads and timelines that just weren't adding up. Evidence that was not sticking, and of course, these coerced confessions. The very thing holding this case together started falling apart. One crack became two cracks became 10. Until eventually the entire case just collapsed. The charges of course got dismissed when they found out about the coerced confessions and the police misconduct. And just like that, 5 young men who had been painted as these monsters in their community got to walk free and go home. But the part that's so haunting to me is that getting to go home and be free does not erase what happened to you. You don't get those sleepless nights back. You don't get to erase the terror in your mind that the government might be about to unalive you for something you didn't even do. You just supposed to wake up the next morning and trust the police department now all of a sudden. They still expect you to want to call 911 when something is going on in your area. No, because the last time I heard 911 being called, it was against me. Because the Dawson 5 wasn't just about 5 young black men. It's about how thin the ice can be between justice and vengeance when fear starts to take over. And the only reason people even know about this story today is because enough folks started to ask questions about this case. enough people started to look closer and dig deeper and not just take the first version of the story. Because if nobody did, if nobody outside of this town had took the time to care about these young black men, if they never put enough pressure on the justice system in Dawson, if history had repeated itself one more time with these young black men, Southwest Georgia might not be remembering the Dawson 5 as 5 young black men that survived. We would be remembering 5 young black men with headstones who were labeled as murderers. But before you walk away thinking that every story ends with the truth finally winning, this case about the Dawson 5 stood out to me when I heard another person's case. Another case from right here in Southwest Georgia, another case involving 5 young black men and 1 white man who had his life taken. But this case is a little bit different, because in the case of the Dawson 5, the confessions were actually the reason why everybody found out something about this ain't right. But in the next case, 4 of the men involved actually admitted to their involvement with this unaliving. But there's a 5th man, DeMonte Price, and according to the story he told me and the evidence he was able to provide, he was nowhere around when this situation even took place. But somehow he's still serving the same amount of time as the 4 guys who actually admitted to doing it. Run that back. 4 people admitted that they were involved. But the one guy who said he wasn't even there, he was out shopping with his family, still ends up with the same punishment? Now that should make you stop for a second. Because if the Dawson 5 can teach you what happens when a confession is questioned, what would happen if everybody agreed 4 people were involved in this case, and the 5th guy says that he wasn't? What if nobody took the time to look close enough to this person's case? And that's the story we're going to talk about next time. And trust me, this one is going to leave you with more questions than answers.